Welcome to another episode of Vicarious Insights, Learn With Me, the podcast where we delve into the diverse world of disability services, bringing you insights from professionals, parents and individuals with lived experience. I'm Jace, your host, and today we have a very special guest joining us. It's Aaron, who is a Clinical and Operations Manager at Be Active, Allied Health and Performance.
G'day everybody, nice to meet you.
Thank you for joining us. Now, you're an exercise physiologist?
100%. That's my background. I basically picked a degree at random based off interest in it. While I was going through that, I was working a little bit in sport and working a little bit with performance, strength and conditioning, and then you just instantly start to see that people who have real issues that are lowering their quality of life, it's far more rewarding to work with those people than people who are trying to get the tiniest little extra 1% on top. And so I sort of shifted into this line of work naturally.
Okay. That's interesting you say that. That was pretty close to us to the way that Kira, who was one of our previous exercise physiologists, that was in one of our previous podcasts. So she said the same thing. It's like, yep, that 1% is cool and great, but really helping those guys out that need it to have a little bit of a happier existence.
100%. I reckon as well, I sometimes hear people get into it for sort of selfish reasons, just meaning that they're trying to solve their own problems. And when I was 11 or 12, I got diagnosed with scoliosis, which turned out to be quite severe, just like a quite severe curvature of the spine. And all through my adolescence, I was trying to manage that, perform, and experiencing a lot of pain pretty continuously. And I engaged with a lot of different professionals or professions and couldn't really get anything actionable or anything where I felt it's sort of like, okay, what can I do for myself as opposed to just what's the treatment? And I couldn't really get anything. So that made me investigate it even further for my own benefit, my own understanding.
Yeah, okay. And so delving down your own rabbit hole there, that's what for scoliosis, how did you, so for our viewers, we're going to be talking about pain. So we're going to be talking about
pain, movement, then pain, for sure. That's the topic.
With the scoliosis, as you said, it was pretty severe. So then you're going to be with that, I'm imagining, walking in an not ideal gait and a not ideal position. And that's going to be continually causing your muscles to be pulling in not the happiest directions. And there's going to be continual pain, I'm guessing.
Yeah, and I could go on this point for a little while, but I think that a lot of people might find it interesting because as part of that whole journey for myself, particularly from having it at a young age where, like, you know, I basically ended up with issues everywhere throughout my body. I think a lot of it, I was the kind of person mentally where I would then try and over control what I'm doing and kind of just push through it. So then I ended up in a situation where, you know, I was 14 or 15 and like I couldn't put a bar on my back to do a barbell back squat because my back hurt too much. I couldn't run, felt like my knees were going to, you know, give out. And the psychological component was as part of that going through, I ended up getting diagnosed with ADHD and ASD as well, and started looking into the connection between what you were saying with scoliosis and these patterns of tension in these muscles and how much more common it is in neurodivergent populations. And this connection with sort of a sensory awareness where you in your body, you feel like you're in a certain position, but due to not being aware, you're actually holding yourself in this certain other position and introducing all this unnecessary tension. So that's when the needle really started to move for me.
Okay. But so I have a habit of I've got to sort of like visualize, and as you're saying that, I don't know if you use, I'm sort of contorting myself to see where my body would be so I could feel what that was. But as I was doing that, did you say, so you're diagnosed with ADHD and ASD?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. So ADHD and ASD.
Okay. And there you go. I can tell the boys I've worked with a few clients with autism, and it'd be like, look, man, these exercise physiologists guys, no excuse, right?
I mean, it's the dream job. It's the dream job because you stand around talking to people, moving around, and pretty much having a laugh. So, like, you got to do a bit of study, but pretty rewarding one, pretty fun one, yeah.
And lots of puzzles to solve.
Pardon?
And lots of puzzles to solve.
Oh yeah, I mean, yeah, like because a lot of my background specifically, I always was really interested in biomechanics and like the specific ways the joints and bones move, and just to help people with the most complex problems. But sort of as I went through that process, you quickly find that for a lot of people, like the biggest, not like problem they have, but I suppose the biggest thing to bring up and consider is like, particularly with people with really, really chronic pain. Like I've worked with people who, you know, they've seen 15 specialists, they've had an issue for 30 years, they can't do anything, can't play with their kids, can barely walk, just due to the pain experience itself. You quickly find that you end up talking very deeply with people about their their self-perception and like their willingness or unwillingness to, I suppose, experience certain sensation, or like what sensation kind of, could really go down a deep track there, but sort of like how people sort of understand their own feelings from their body, and you become very psychological with a lot of your treatment within scope, just discussing beliefs.
Yeah, I find the brain side really interesting and intriguing, and I can't help but question things and wonder, and it's a part of what this is understanding those little bits. It's and yeah. So even if you learn things that might be outside of scope, as long as when you're applying them within, it's that knowledge can be helpful for what you do because you know it. Does that make sense outside my head?
Hey, look, anything's relevant because, like, I mean, you can apply concepts from anywhere, and that, like, God, we could do a whole episode about coaching, but I feel like that's a whole different story. But just like anything in life, because it's the same as with pain or your own experience. Like the amount of times that you have a conversation with someone that, this is an oversimplification, but like they might come in and say, you know, I had a guy who had fibromyalgia and chronic fatigue. He might come in and say, like, I've done literally nothing different. This week is horrendous. This is shocking. It's come out of completely nowhere. And then you actually speak to him and you're like, oh, so you had to go to this social event with a bunch of people you didn't really like, and then you had to stay out late to do that, and you were already putting yourself through it a bit, and then the next day you've woken up and felt like this. Are you so sure that you haven't been through anything stressful or anything painful that could have, like, it's all relevant?
Yeah, okay. So fibromyalgia, is that, I mean, my understanding is that they don't know, or that there's so many different variables, but is it like a manifestation of a psychological pain? Is there like a neural pathway that's touching on that part, right?
It's tricky to describe those ones, eh? I think that the word itself kind of says it all, because if you look at how it's actually made, it's literally just like tissues of the body, fibro, myalgia, pain, and it's a diagnosis of elimination. So for a lot of people with that diagnosis, what their experience has been they've had a pain experience that's very sticky and long term. People go, like specialists go, we've checked absolutely everything else. It's not anything else. It's probably fibro, or it's probably central sensitivity syndrome, or it's probably, and like all that it's describing with the diagnosis label is that your body is hurting and your body is in pain and feels bad. There's not anything. It's different for every person as to what it could be.
Okay, so it's more of it's the name for something else that they haven't been able to test for specifically.
Literally, like, you feel bad, but we don't know why.
Yeah.
It's not in your head like some psychological. It's nothing that we can see physically in your body, but you certainly say that you're in pain all the time, and that must be real. We have no clue. So then, after people have been through all that experience, and then you come and meet them, like, they have this history of, same as anybody, just a history of an experience, but it's mostly a negative one. It's mostly a painful one. And yeah, that can be very complex, but yeah, I'll let you talk.
Yeah, I'm just here to listen. I enjoy all of this. Yeah, I said a joke before, but I enjoy the pain. I enjoy the concepts, especially when there's something where it's why, like why, like there has to be a cause and effect. Like, but smarter people than me don't know yet.
I reckon then. All right. Well, I could, because man, I mean, like, it's a sadistic job, because essentially I am just stressing people. Like, you literally stand there, go like, get in this position or do this that's really hard, change this to make it harder. But like, maybe a good illustration, like somebody I worked with one time. This was a guy who was in his mid-20s, and he was essentially like completely unable to engage in life due to just his pain experience that he was having. And when I sort of asked him about it, and like, when did this come on and what's the story here, you start to see all these different kind of psychological and physical, well, you just start to see there's not that much difference, because he'd been diagnosed with every one of these different conditions. So he'd been diagnosed with fibromyalgia, he'd been diagnosed with central sensitivity syndrome. Central is literally brain, so like sensitive brain syndrome, like chronic fatigue, again, a bit of a elimination where they're just like, you appear to be tired all the time, we don't know why. And so when he was like 16, he'd gotten quite a physically demanding job, like manual laboring. And he's like, I just felt really sore after it. I figured that was normal. But then I stayed like that and was getting worse and worse, and everybody else kind of adapted to the job. And then he sort of starts to talk about why the condition is so much of a struggle for him, because he's like, I'm a winner. I always put in 200%. I was completely dominant in sports, athletics, and I couldn't really let this sort of defeat me. And then years had passed, and he'd literally had specialists who had said stuff like, all right, we'll try this and this medication because we think it's this issue. If that doesn't work, that's the limits of human knowledge, and there's no more that we can do. They then try it and it doesn't work at all. And then so that's his perception of where the rest of his life is going. And then, trying to move from there and make a change from there.
Yeah, wow.
Oh, yeah, it can be pretty like, and so then he's like in his early life, basically trying to get a start in life. And so we had a lot of, and he said something to me I thought was interesting, where it was like, I don't genuinely believe that I could get better. I don't think there could be any improvement. The most I can think positively is to think that I don't have all the answers. So although I'm 100% certain there's nowhere to go, I could be missing something and someone could bring something out. So that for me is something that highlights when you start to see like how the mind can, I guess, open up or close off different avenues for you with these kind of issues and really, really chronic pain.
Yeah. Yeah, that's okay. That's the more I learn about different things, the like the empathy for things that you can't understand, like you haven't been through it, and like it's just like you like you know, yeah. There's no words. I'm like blah, 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 blah.
Oh yeah, 100%.
So that's well. So you said that. So that's your chronic pain. What would you say is the difference between chronic pain and acute pain?
Well, in a really basic sense, it's how long you've had it for. And so if you were to literally like play sport, or if you do some physical activity and then the next day you wake up and, you know, you might have sore muscles, but let's say like you twinged your knee while you were doing something and then the next day was kind of stiff, kind of sore, that'd be acute pain. But then if you found that a few weeks down the track, it feels kind of the same, starting to get worse, or it comes good, but then you find you have to be very careful about it and it comes back a lot, that starts to become more of a chronic issue, a chronic pain sort of described thing.
Okay, so the acute pain in that scenario with that young fella, what everybody else was experiencing from their new physical labor job, that was your acute pain, and then the fact that it kept carrying on for him, that's where you're going off into the chronic. Okay, and so when you're looking at management strategies for that, your acute pain, it's rest and massage and
all sorts, because a lot of the time, a big component of that is saying to people like, hey, look, based on what you've said, we've assessed it, we have a decent understanding. Here's the natural history, which is just what will happen if we do nothing. A lot of the time, you can just be in a position where you're mostly reassuring people and being like, continue to do what you can with an awareness that for, say, 4 weeks, you're in a healing process. And so you kind of can't go too wrong or too right. And then you might be looking at something like, you know, if that issue occurred because of, you know, some restriction you had, like an inability to sort of get in a certain, like if you got forced into a certain position in sport that you weren't ready for, and then you have a pain experience, that's fair enough. Yeah. You might just find if it's something you don't want to have that pain again, then you may need to prepare yourself for that and look down an exercise track, or it might just be a really out there one and you go sort of like whatever, like it was just unlucky. But then chronic, you have like, I used to work a lot with veterans as well, where you end up in a similar-ish scenario where you have a lot of people who have been injured often quite badly and have a lot of trauma associated with these experiences. And then a lot of the time, you're not actually dealing with physical injuries from their service period, but then later. And there are these issues that have come on gradually, become more and more persistent, and now they're basically stuck with them and they've kind of converted from a one-off to an ongoing issue.
Okay. Sorry, my brain just went down a couple of different pathways then when you were saying that. I was like because when you said with the vets, my brain went to a doco I saw years ago about phantom limb syndrome. Somebody had their gone, whatever, and their neural pathways had joined together because that part of their brain existed attached to that, and that was gone, but that part of the brain was still. So it's joined some neural pathways. So when you touched that part of your hand, he could feel his arm there, even though it wasn't actually there. And as I was so sorry, this is just how my brain works.
Same way. I'm always worried about talking over people, but this is good. I'll tell you what, this is something I think is can put a bit to that concept as well, because what I see so often, and this can be from, an injury that's come over and over and over and over, or a lot of the time, the reason people have so much frustration, or a reason people have so much frustration with these sort of whole body, or just feel bad, like feel in pain, body doesn't feel good. There are a lot of neurological adaptations, and there are a lot of, what I consistently see is a lot of the time it's like if someone has pain in an area, or like let's just say shoulder or something, if you ask them, if you go like, what does it feel like? Oh, it feels painful. What would you like it to feel like? Not painful.
Yeah.
But you literally can't perceive any other feeling in it. It's because the whole association between your brain and your shoulder, because you've had it for so long, is that's my shoulder. How do I describe my shoulder? I describe it as painful. It's useless. I can't use it. It doesn't function. It's damaged. It's injured. But you can't actually accurately feel what it's actually like, I guess, if that makes sense.
Because maybe at one stage it felt stabby, but then you got used to numb to the stabby and it was just a hurty feel. And then maybe it was, okay. Yeah.
And so a lot of the time, like if you want to get into the really, well, like even if you go down a track of thinking about I think the word most people would use here is almost something like mindfulness. But like every thought that you have, to some degree, big or little, is associated with a sort of pattern of tension in your body. Because like the thoughts have to create electricity to go around you. But that's going to send a signal. And like a good example that most people could relate to would just be like, if you just think about like a really bad breakup that you had, or, like, I mean, don't have to think of it, a bit miserable, but, or like a family member going through something, or a big loss in your life, you feel it instantly in your body. Not only the emotional feeling, but also a sort of physical body feeling. Or like if you imagine you were about to get in a fight or an altercation or an argument or something, you'd feel the tension in your body. And you can create those same associations with an area that's given you a problem, just kind of in reverse in a way.
Yeah, okay.
Because that would be something I'd say a lot of people had to deal with, like that I've worked with, who have had issues for a very long time, or wanted to really change how they feel. A lot of the time, there's something to consider, at least, is they really struggle to imagine any other feeling except what they're feeling right now. And they're just feeling this tension or stiffness or pain or tightness or restriction. And like they have nothing to move towards, I guess.
Yeah, okay. That's how it's always, And okay. And when you've got the pain, you tend to move away from it. So if it's in like I said, with your lower back, like if you've got something there, you're going to move in a slightly different position until you find one that hurts on the least level. And that is, you're like, okay, your brain's like, okay, this is about as good as we're going to get, and then you play a trickle down effect, is where your knees are going to start to hurt. They're working in some share, and your ankles are going to start to hurt, your shoulders or your neck, because everything else is out of whack because you're taking the pain away from there. So you've got your,
And that process itself can be a really tricky kind of seductive one for a lot of people, because a lot of people use this phrase in a way that I think can become unclear what they mean. It's kind of when you hear people say stuff about, like, you know, pain is psychological or pain comes from the brain. But all I really take that to mean, which I think is a little bit more constructive, is the body is not feeling the pain. The body is feeling the signals. Like, it can't send a pain signal. You get a signal to your brain, and then your brain kind of scrutinizes it and goes, what's that? What do I reckon it is? And okay, I reckon it's I just touched that, I reckon it's hot. Or I just felt that, I reckon it feels good, or I reckon it feels painful. And so it kind of has to draw on what you've experienced in the past. So what I was really getting at was, what you can run into is, I have a pain experience, an experience of pain. I want to move away from it. So I'll find some way to move, or some position that I can get into, and it goes away. But by doing that, you now are engaged in a process of micromanaging your movement and your body position.
Yep.
And you end up more in a situation of, like, when people make that joke about, like, don't think about a purple elephant, where you're just having the experience of your body and how it feels bad, and then trying to find a way to make it go away by thinking about it and how to get away from it. It can easily, for a lot of people, quickly become their whole experience, and they consume their focus completely.
Yeah, so don't think about it. You think about it, you think about it, you think about it, you think about it. You're never not thinking about it. There's always a purple elephant in the room.
And you're always going to get more and more focused on it because you're thinking about it. So, like, you're literally sitting there going, like, this sucks, I'm in pain, this is terrible, why is it happening? Trying to come up with theories, trying to come up with solutions. And it literally blocks you from engaging in the world and getting some new information to draw on, to make some new meaning and change your experience. And yeah, it becomes extremely limiting.
Okay. And how much of pain do you reckon is physiological versus psychological then?
Well, I think there's a really nifty study that I really like, where I might not do it justice because it's off the top of my head, but essentially they're trying to calculate people's pain tolerance.
Yeah.
They get people's thumb, and they stick them in like just a thing that puts pressure on your thumb. And then, without showing the people how much pressure they put on their thumb, they just gradually increase it and get the person to rate how painful it is. And I think it really highlights the difference between people's experience, because there were people who were having 1 pound of pressure, or 500 grams of pressure on their thumb, and they're like, oh, that's really painful. That's like 7 or 8 out of 10. I could maybe, oh no, and they pull their thumb out. And there were people who had 10 pounds of pressure being put on their thumbnail and going, like, that is becoming uncomfortable, like that's irritating. And then, like, the experimenter's like, well, it doesn't actually go any higher. Like, that's the highest.
So they did have a stopping point.
Yeah, not just infinite, but yeah. And, like, the thing that's crazy for me is, like, those two people, one only felt that 1 pound was tolerable, one felt that 10 pounds was tolerable. They have no way to compare their own experience. And those people both experience pain in the same way. It just takes a lot more or less of the same thing to experience it as painful.
So was there a difference in how long like the pressure was applied? Like, so this guy, he goes, oh, 0 to 1, and it's like, or is it like, okay, this is taking 5 minutes to get from 0 to 1, and his brain's like, must be worse, must be worse, must be worse, oh, it's worse, oh crap, it's bad, Jesus, can it get even better? Like,
Yeah, so what they did was they basically they went from nothing to whatever it was going to be next. You
yeah,
had to have it in there for a certain period of time. If
yeah,
you wanted to take it out before that time, they took the one below that to be your highest level.
okay. And so that was the controllers keeping it was always the same. So, okay. Was there, do you know if there was any of them that were perceiving it as getting worse while they were at that level, like thinking it was still going up?
Probably, but from my recollection, I would bet, I don't know if they had some reward or if that's ethical or something for like keeping it there, but I'm sure for a lot of people it got worse and worse, and that's why they couldn't tolerate it.
Yeah.
Another similar example is just the way that, or a way that, for example, fibromyalgia is diagnosed or at least assessed, is these certain, almost like a questionnaire, where like it might be, for example, this is not doing it justice, but like essentially like what can you tolerate in certain areas of your body? Is it painful? Is it not painful? Like what lightness of touch, types of sensations. But my point is there's a cutoff criteria. So it adds up like points. Once you get above a certain level, you can receive your diagnosis. But that to me means there's people out there who got 0, and there's people out there who got 1 point below the threshold. Neither of these people have anything diagnosed, but they would have a completely different experience of how much pain they experience day to day, how sensitive or insensitive they are to certain feelings, sensations. And I think the fact that that is not highlighted, like, I mean, this is like a cultural thing, but the fact that that's not highlighted to people in a clear way, where it's like, you can be experiencing things extremely differently from others and probably need a different individual personal strategy to understand and process like what you're experiencing.
You could have someone that is, for the point of numbers, experiencing a 10 out of 10 pain all day, every day, and that's how they've had since birth, and that's just how they experience the world, and they work with it. You have somebody that hasn't had that, and then when they're 7 or 10 or 20 or 30 or whatever, all of a sudden they're getting half of that level of pain, but because they know the left from the right, they know the difference, then it's all of a sudden it's debilitating. And that's not that pain is real. I'm knowing the picture that's in my head there with that. So it's because how can you measure somebody's different experience? Because if I put your thumb in a vice, just like you said, like this guy's going to be like, whoa, and that guy's going to be like, keep going, I like it.
Exactly. And it's so, to think about the fact that somebody could be having that experience you just described, where like from like nothing, I mean, everybody has had some negative experiences, but they've never had some like event that's caused them a heap of like what people would externally view as problems or reasons for injury or reasons for like suffering. But if they, from day one, from the virtue of what parents they had, they experienced things a certain way, they could be having that kind of experience, and then down the track, a great mystery. Oh, this person seems to be really tired all the time, or this person seems to not want to engage in the world the same way that others want to engage in the world, or they seem to be a lot more reactive to stuff. Like they literally are more reactive and from a nerve perspective, more sensitive to the same thing. They would experience the same thing more intensely.
Yeah.
And that, yeah, I think that's a lot of the time what can be missed, because that would be something that people are like, I think something that's really hard when you have anything limiting you, or any bad experience, or particularly pain that you experience for a long time, you're just trying to answer a lot of the time, like, why is it happening? Why am I not able to do what other people can do? They literally seem like this is not bothering them, and it is really affecting me. And like, a lot of the time, what I would be putting across to people to consider in a roundabout way is essentially like, what if that just literally is the case, and like, this activity is more challenging for you, or more demanding, or even if you can do it, it's harder to do. And like, do you even care if that's the case? Like, do you want to do this, or do you just want to be like the same as others? Or is this just your idea of what it is to perform this type of stuff? And like, is it more productive to look at that rather than a physical cause that may not be present? It's just your experience.
So meaning, like, if you're looking with someone that's dealing with pain, and or dealing with that discomfort, and everything's harder because of it, look, sometimes maybe change your intentions and look for the path of least resistance. Is that what you mean there? Or if I just draw a different...
I could say that, because like, this is, I mean, how many times have you run into this, or maybe even done it yourself? I'm the sort of person where when I do something like physically and it feels kind of uncomfortable, or it doesn't feel good, I'm the type of person who will then do it again multiple times. Like, you know, I do, or I just go like, oh, my knee feels weird. And then I'm squatting, I'm getting down over my knee, I'm doing all weird different movements, being like, why does it feel so weird? But like, and then at the end of it, I'm like, now my knee really hurts.
Yeah, yeah. It's like, yeah. There's a sore there.
Yeah,
Yep, still hurts.
Exactly. And so I would have conversations with people, like going back to that guy with fibromyalgia who was talking about the day where like nothing happened, but then he had a bunch of other experiences and then he was suffering. I was coming at that from purely the perspective of, it's your life and your goals are your own. However, if your goal, which you've asked me to help you achieve, is to not have as many flare-ups of your pain, not be as limited, not feel as bad day to day, well, you literally just described to me a bunch of stuff that you forced yourself to do, even though you knew it would make you feel worse, because you had a belief, or have a belief, that going to those sort of things is part of being a friend to people, having relationships with people, and you need to do that in order to like kind of deserve to have those relationships. Because his biggest worry was like, what am I just going to say to everybody? Oh, I feel bad, and not go every time, then I'll have no mates. And so I was sort of saying like, if you would, I was sort of asking him if he'd be open to exploring, like, if it's literally making him feel worse, how important is it to him? And you can kind of apply that to anything, because he could find it could be very important. And then you go down the track of, well, man, like, what kind of friends are, like, you literally have this diagnosis. Like, what kind of friends are they if you like express that and they're like, oh, well, you still have to go, or you're not our mate, even though you're literally wrecked for like 3 days.
Yeah. So there's, and that is like, it's a matter of removing the variables in that same situation. Like, okay, so I'm uncomfortable around, I have 3 crappy days after I see 20 friends. Next time, maybe I'll try and see 10 friends. If it's still crappy, 5, then 1 at a time. And then if there's any difference or any variation in that, then it's like, well, hang on, that's something to work with. So,
and that is actually empowering, because then you're in a situation where, because so often I think the frustration people have with specifically pain or generally any sort of disability or impairment is like wanting to do certain things, feeling unable to do them. And a lot of the time, I feel like what is being missed is an acceptance that it is more challenging.
Yeah.
And it doesn't mean to avoid it, but like it's accurate feedback. Because if you're going through life having this, let's go with the friends one. If you're going through life having something like this belief, hanging out with people and being social is a completely typical part of life that should not challenge me in any way. In your own experience, it's actually extremely challenging and draining.
Yeah.
Now you have no way to influence, you lose any ability to influence that. But if you're willing to say, I find this much more challenging than other people, and maybe, well, in my eyes, I don't even really like it a lot of the time, but more challenging than others, and I can literally handle less of it without it impacting other things I care about. Once you kind of have that view, then you can do that process you just described of being like, what's an amount I can do that is aligned with what I want to do and my values, as opposed to just force myself to do as much as other people ask and then suffer later.
And when you've got control, there's generally going to be a little bit less anxiety as well, which may be compounding that pain response or exacerbating it.
Because you're going to be stressed. You're literally entering a stressful experience and inflicting it upon yourself. And the control can even play out further with like, this is going to, like, I'm going to have a big social week, or I'm going to have a big physical week or something. And I know that I really want to do all this stuff, and it's going to really take it out of me. So I'm going to do less of other things that are draining and demanding on me to make space for what's important to me.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. That's a point, isn't it? So this is going to hurt me. I know it's going to hurt me, and it's happening in a week. So a week leading up to that, I'm thinking about that. My cortisol levels. I'm literally on a chemical hormonal level. There's a change in my chemistry, and it's going to give me pain. And that change, it's.
Oh yeah. And then if you get into a position where somebody might, and I think this is a Western culture thing too, people constantly they feel very tense, like stressed, tensed, tight, restricted, can't relax. And like life is very stressful for a lot of people. And that circles back to having those patterns related to your experience that go through your body. Like most people I've met who are experiencing a lot of chronic pain that's more whole body in nature, they're very stressed and they feel very stressed. They feel and experience their life as really challenging. And then they're coming to me and literally saying, I feel very tense. I physically feel very restricted and tightened up. Yeah.
And that's so from that, so if we're going back to that physiological versus psychological, then it's feeding each other, isn't it? Like it's the brain's making that happen, and that's making the brain. It's how can you measure 2 cups of water when you keep pouring them into each other?
100%. And like generally, when my experience is when I miss what someone's saying and I don't get the message, they just say the same thing again louder. And then you have often people where they've wanted to ignore the issue or they've wanted to ignore what they're feeling, and then they feel as though it's all they can feel and it's overwhelming. So there's a connection with psychological and physiological there as well.
Yeah.
And then suddenly you wake up and you feel really, really bad, and then the day is a total write-off. And then I used to and sometimes describe to people like it's better to try and like life is chaotic. So you can't really go like this or like that. But if we're going to spiral in one direction, we should probably spiral upwards instead of spiraling downwards. And so that's actually about limiting yourself as opposed to trying to do more and more and more and more of everything at the same time.
Yeah, okay. So I go back over these videos and I listen to them again as I'm editing them, and I know there's a lot of things that you've said that have spiraled my brain over in this direction, and I'm just in there thinking about the concept that you've given me, and I'm like, oh crap, he's still talking. What did I?
Well, hopefully there's something useful in there when you go over it, because like you definitely got.
No, there's loads. There's I enjoy these concepts. There's looking at the paint, like it's that's a good thing. As I like when I go back, I enjoy because you're out of the moment. Like when I go and then I can pause and rewind, and I go back and I'm like, holy crap, he said that. Hang on, go back and I'm like, and you get to read more in between the lines and stuff like that as well. So anyone listening, if I have to go back and listen to it again, you have to go back and listen to it again as well. But you missed what I missed too, right? When you're assessing someone's pain, what are some of the things that you look for?
So, all right, now you're really speaking my language. So the very first thing that I do, and this is quite procedural because I had to make it procedural, or you end up making too many decisions and missing information. But the first thing that I always sort of assess when I see somebody is just literally how they present. Like I almost said posture, but I don't mean in a like sort of way, more like in a way of, are they tensed up? Are they speaking rapidly? Are their eyes moving rapidly? Or do they kind of come in and they're like, hey, how you going?
Yeah.
Because it's generally going to inform what they want from me. The people who come in and are very, very high up and sort of agitated, they're generally going to want something like, I want to be out of pain, or I have this problem, get rid of the problem right now, get rid of this feeling that I have. And this isn't negative, but they're in a more emotional way of being at that moment. But the person who comes in and sits super chill, hey, how you going? Usually the first thing they ask you for is they go, I want to know why I got this problem and what's the plan. You say whatever you say and they go, oh yeah, cool. All right, sweet. But yeah, then for mine, it's pretty much like everyone will have come in for a reason. They'll have some thing that they want to be different, basically. And so then my job, in my eyes, is essentially, when did it happen? What did you feel like before that? And sort of understand their whole history. So I'm usually looking at physical issues, or a lot of the time I'm looking at physical issues. So then I'm looking at, I might come in and say their knee hurts. But if their knee hurts and it's hurt for 4 weeks, it's going to be really different than if their knee hurts and their knee is hurt for 8 years. And 9 years ago, they tore their hamstring. 12 years ago, they rolled their ankle and tore one of their ankle ligaments. 13 years ago, they had another injury. So I want to get that whole history of the person. And then I'll basically be like, was any other stuff happening around that time? Or was it purely, because even if it's something like someone saying, I got this injury, it was my first, I got picked to go overseas and play. I was alone from my family for the first time in my life. My girlfriend texted me as we landed and said it's over. And then I had to play, and the next week my knee got injured. Or just they had a really challenging period in their life. And so then if it's from there, I mean, you're really looking at what they need to do in a day, what they want to do in a day, and like what's really important to them, like, and what they value. And then, okay, if it's a physical thing, well, let's get up and have a look at some things and try and get an understanding and essentially go from there, I would say. And then sort of throughout that process, you're getting a good understanding of or a decent, haven't just met them, getting a decent understanding of somebody's personality, their beliefs around their issue. I always ask people, what is their theory? What have you tried before? What's worked? What hasn't worked? That'd be the general rundown.
Okay, I suppose when you're asking people about their pain and their reasoning behind it, it's probably going to open you up to a whole plethora of different thought processes on, because if you're hurting all the time, your brain needs to fill in the blank of why. Like, you're going to be constantly trying to fill in that line, and you're going to have people that are going from the purely scientific to the this and this. Like, the reason this happened is because I cheated on my missus last week, and that's why I've been in pain. So, like, there's those different things. Like, I deserve this, so it's happened. Is like, just, I was thinking when you're talking about, like, I've gone overseas, this happened, this has happened, this happened, and now I've hurt my knee, and there's a lot of emotional baggage went bang all at once, and then there's a physical manifestation or something that's happened that I can attach that to.
And I think a nice example of what you're illustrating there is working with a lot of veterans. So their experience of, like, it's a good way to put this, how they approach doing physical tasks. Their approach has been, you do it because you get told to do it, and you're literally in the military. And if you're doing, like, even training, for example, or like the PT, or, like, the literal boot camp, they literally, a guy stands out the front and says, everyone will now do this many times. And then everybody does that. And if you are unable to do that physically, everybody then basically derides you and sees you as lesser and kind of like a shirker, and wanting to get out of doing hard work. So those people then leave the military, and then when they run into any sort of real problem physically, or just something where they go, oh, that didn't feel good, or that felt a bit strange, their literal only thought process to fall back on is, I'll now literally just staunch it out. But you can't staunch it out forever, because it's literally just a feeling that you're getting from moving around, living life. And, like, if day-to-day things are causing, like, huge pain and problems, and you push through it and fully ignore it, it tends to get worse. They tend to feel worse until it physically stops and it's unbearable.
Yeah. And that's got to be a bottleneck situation too, doesn't it? It's going to go pop.
Yeah, you run out of space to do, like, if a part of your body hurts, I'll use another part. But then if that part hurts as well, eventually you just run out of parts that you can use. Like, you only have two legs, so if both hurt, walking is going to be tough.
Yeah. Yes, it is. Yes, it is.
Yeah, then I'll just give this quick anecdote. Like, even guys saying to me, I say guys because no girls have said it, purely coincidence, it's just one person. But we were talking about, like, doing some exercise in his own time to help with his issue. And he was like, look, I know it'd be good because what we've done here has worked. I don't do it. And I tried to think of why I don't do it. And I reckon I've just never done anything for myself, just, like, purely for my own benefit. I was firstly doing it in service in the military, and then to support my family. And I just don't think I'm in the habit of putting aside time in my day that's genuinely reserved for myself and improving how I feel. And so I'm just not really sure how to do
it. Okay. So you've almost got to order them, and you've got to be like, well, you know, in this exercise realm, I am your superior. You need to do this at 0500 on a Monday and a Wednesday.
Well, you've got to get a bit more involved in the planning of it, for sure. And the great thing about exercise is, like, I know if they haven't done it, like, you can't really hide, because they come back and you go, yep, that still looks the same. And did you do it? No, I didn't do it. Well, that explains that. Do you still have the problem? Yeah. Well, yep. Okay, cool. Like,
as a PT, I get that a lot. Like, I've probably said it on a few of the podcasts, but a client come along and you're like, hey, what are your issues? What are your injuries? What have you got? And it's like, oh, you know, this sore ankle, I've got this sore shoulder or whatever. And it's, how long has it been sore? Oh, like 10 years. Oh, geez, like that's a while. Oh, yeah, I went to physio like 10 years ago. Oh, okay. Did they give you something to do? Yeah. Did you do it? No. And it still hurts? Yeah. So what have you learned from this? I should have done the exercises. Yeah. And I did the same thing. I should know. I went to physio. He gave me the exercises that'll fix it. And the next time I went to physio, he's like, did you do it? And I'm like, I did it yesterday because I knew it was coming today.
It was coming there night before. Yeah. And I think you could really wax lyrical on that point, because I think it's a big failing of our industry that, like, at the end of the day, like, okay, if we take it out of exercise, if somebody's trying to sell me a TV, and let's say I don't have a TV, they're trying to sell me a TV and they give me like a weak sales pitch. I say what I want, I say what I need, and then I'm sort of like, I don't really know if that's a TV for me. Nah. No one's going to be like, well, you should have bought that TV off of Old Mate. They're going to be like, oh, not a very good salesman. And, like, I think so often people are stitched up by the sort of movement professional, physical therapy profession, where they come in and they say what their problem is. No one really knows how to describe their problem that accurately. It's the same as, like, if someone comes into the mechanic and the mechanic says, what is the problem on a physical level? I don't know, man. What am I paying you for? Like, but, like, so people struggle to get across what they fully want and need. And then the professional is unable to really elicit that out of them. They may or may not then identify something actionable with the problem. But even if they can, they often can't clearly explain it to the person in a way where, like, you have them nodding and going like, oh my God. Like, I always, when I'm giving any sort of explanation to someone I'm seeing, all I'm doing is referencing what I saw and what they said to what they told me has happened in the past, and being like, I can see a connection here. Can you or not? And at the end of that process, when we have something we agree on, I'm just like, cool. Well, I reckon that if we do X, Y, Z, we'll probably be able to do this after this long. And that's just yes or no. Can you do it or not after doing that? If no, well, we're probably wrong. If yes, step 2, step 3, step 4. And then so people haven't done that, haven't gotten that, really in the back of their mind, haven't really rated the exercises or thought it would work, and then not done it. Or when they've done it, they've been like, this isn't really doing anything, I don't reckon, and they stop.
I think the word for it, I think, is not Instagram worthy. I think there's a lot of people, like, you give them that little movement, all you have to do is this, all you have to do is this, and like whatever this is, like, you know, like all you have to do is like simple, boring, basic movement that's going to hit that perfect muscle that's going to get that stronger so that your balance is corrected and then the rest of your body can move. But people are like, but I don't have to stand on one leg, I don't have to rub my elbow, I don't have to scratch my nose at the same time, and I'm a special little snowflake, so that's probably not the thing that's going to work for me, that basic little perfect movement that the exercise, the X-Phys or the physio or whatever has, because that's how we it's like quite often with those sorts of things, I'm thinking like shoulders and you know, ankles and knees and stuff like that, like those little movements that can correct that balance. But then it just doesn't get done. It never gets done, and then there's pain for like years. Like that. But you guys.
Oh yeah, like I got a study I love about this, which is like it's trying to measure how much of home programs people do, and it's something like.
They study that.
Yeah, because they're like, how do we solve these problems? Like, you know, chronic lower back pain is like one of the world's leading disabilities and one of the leading causes of like cost and days lost of productivity.
Okay.
So they're like, how do we get people to do exercise? Do they do them? But like my favorite thing is like, if you give someone one exercise or two exercises, all right, yeah, fair chance. Any third exercise that you give in a program, regardless of what it is, reduces the chance of the whole program itself being completed by like 70%.
Oh, wow.
And so literally just giving people one or two things instead of a heap of things is going to make it much more likely to get done. And like I one time had a mentor say to me like, okay, well, if it is actually simple and it is like a musculoskeletal thing, why do you have to give like 10 exercises for it? Like, why not just solve the problem? And like, you know, easy to say, there's a bit to it, but like, there's another good line I like, which is 6 hours versus 6 reps. And that was all about like, instead of thinking, how do I fit a set of this exercise into this person's day, you think, what does this person do all day? And what can I give them that changes the thing they do all day to get that thing they want from some exercise? Perfect example would be like people are always either standing or sitting, sometimes lying down, but like you get up out of a chair a lot of the time and a lot of the time through the day. And you might have far better results with somebody just teaching them and helping them understand a way to perform that movement that's going to assist with the change they want to see than saying, go and do this every day, this many reps, that many reps. You'll get them to do it far more by just making it something that's part of their day. And it's actually resilient to real life, which is completely chaotic and random.
So like getting every time you get out of your seat, do 3 squats sort of thing.
Yeah, or even just like to get into it, like, all right, people who I've worked with a lot of people who have a lot of experience a lot of pain in their knees, and to then get into the mechanics, sometimes it's useful to help these people be able to use their hips more. Like if someone's going to stand up, and if you ever see people where anytime they kind of squat, the first thing they do is they push their knee forward really far and then go, I feel a lot of pressure at the front of my knee or a lot of pain at the front of my knee sometimes. I might just explain to that person, try it now in session. If you sort of, you know, and I might just say something about putting their weight somewhere. I might say like, imagine you had something under the arch of your foot, push down on that to stand up. And squash something under your foot to stand up. If they go, that feels way worse, I'm like, all right, well, we'll do something different. If they say, wow, that feels easier, that feels good, I'll be like, great. So just think about doing that through your day to day and tell me how you go with that. Yeah, so what I tend to tell people is when you get ready to stand up, look forwards off the edge of a cliff, which gets your body weight forwards. And then imagine you have an orange or a mandarin under the arch of your foot and just squash that, which gets people to push through the middle of their foot.
Okay, yes, I feel that's interesting. That's activated all up through my lower back from there, for me at least.
Yeah, and it takes all sorts, and it is horses for courses. However, for me, I don't think as a ex-phys, I don't think I have the right to complain about somebody not doing my exercises if I literally didn't sit down with them and figure out a way to make it achievable logistically and fit it into their life.
Yeah. What's the best exercise routine is the one that gets done. It's the
Yeah.
So with your pain management strategies, how would you adapt them when you're looking at people with intellectual or invisible disabilities?
So I think that this basically, what people always say, classic line, it depends, because it does depend on the person. I think the thing for me at the end of the day is that it's like a lot of what I'm talking about with pain management and issues that have been going on for a very long time is essentially improving the communication between you and your body and the communication between you and others. So if somebody is restricted in their communication or restricted in their ability to process and retain and recall information of certain types, for me, like it's really the basic stuff of like, what is a way that these concepts can be understood. I draw a lot of stick men for people. I draw a lot of very basic diagrams for people. You work with people to come up with signals or codes, or, if you're in a situation where someone can't communicate verbally and they're having some experience where they might not want to do an activity because of the pain it'll cause them, because of the fact they'll be suffering, because they genuinely don't want to do it. Like, ultimately, you have to find a way for the message to get through. And I'm not too worried how it does get through. So without a person in front of me, all I would be saying would be whatever way is correct, and like the information gets across accurately and truly. Having an awareness of your own state is, to me, as simple as like even athletes. Like, I love working with athletes because they think a lot. Some of the ones I get on really well with think very basically. You come in, how are you feeling? I'm feeling springy. I'm feeling light. I'm feeling ready to go. They feel $1 million.
Yeah.
Like, and that's the thing for me is like, what are those, even sometimes with people who've had pain for so long, and I'm asking them where they want to go, you can even get into like, how do you want to feel? Like, visualize even before you had this, like, how did you feel? And they'll give you words, or they'll give you movements, or they'll give you a body position or a facial expression or something that will allow you to organize what you're doing towards that expression, towards that communication, that behavior.
Yeah, okay.
Don't know if that helped.
It all helps.
Sweet.
So now, pain. So going back, I guess to the fibro or things like that. So when you're looking, so I've had a few people in my time referred to me as a PT with fibro being told, look, exercise may help. They've also been told that exercise may not help. So, and not necessarily just fibro, just to make it a really weird question. So what would you say, like, roles of strength training play in managing the pain?
For sure. I think that it's a great question. And I reckon that the first thing for me is And this is relevant for anybody. And I think that people often have a really big divide between exercise and then just movement. Yeah. And they can have a very different view of exercise and movement. And so, like, in terms of like, would exercise be beneficial? Is harder to answer than would moving in a way you enjoy be beneficial? And like, that's a bit of a softball one, but like, it's the one to be pursued anyway, because otherwise people won't do it and they won't like it, and they'll get a worse relationship with movement and may have a worse relationship with their body, because it's something that they've added it to their life and it's made them feel worse. So
yeah, so it's that negative reinforcement of the.
Particularly if someone's already feeling, they're already feeling less than, like they're already feeling like they can't engage in things like other people can engage in, or they're already feeling like they should be able to do more. And so then they have, yeah.
Sorry.
Oh, you go.
So that would be like the instead of going, all right, I need you to do 10 star jumps, he'll be going, okay, I need you to go out and do the gardening, which you like, 3 times a week, because then it's got that positive association, and even if it hurts a little bit, then they're not going to hate it because they love it, sort of thing. Is that?
Yeah, mate. I had a client one time. I love the healthcare industry because I got a referral for someone and they said this person is in lockdown in Victoria. They have an extensive history of chronic anxiety, chronic depression, PTSD. They're literally locked on their property and can't leave due to COVID. Can you give them a ring and deliver an exercise program that they will follow? And then next week, can you give them another ring and see how they went with it? And I'm like, okay, I can have a go. Bit to that one. But a conversation we had was I was putting across the concept of what's something you can do every day, because what she was expressing was how she felt like pain controlled her life, and essentially how she felt on a day-to-day basis. She had to take every day as it came because it was chaotic and she couldn't predict it, so she couldn't plan anything. And I was just sort of asking her, like, yeah, that does sound like you end up in a situation where you're literally controlled by your feeling moment to moment. Like, yeah. What we ended up settling on as something that was achievable was she had a property with some horses. And she was like, I water the horses every day. And I was like, would you ever consider watering the horses? Because she wanted to get back to riding the horses, but physically she could not. And then she was feeling sad because the horses, their health, they're just sitting in the stable. I said, so you water the horses every day. Would you take them for a walk around the paddock every day? Like, would they like that? And off the back of that created she went from doing, in her words, like nothing, like I just sit on my couch, to like every day for the next week, she'd gone on this few 100-meter walk with the horses. And like, I don't reckon I could have convinced her to do 10 squats and 10 push-ups, but that was pretty easy.
Yeah.
And
she's having that responsibility of something else too, because she would probably feel guilty if she didn't take the horses because she knew they liked it as much as she did. So she's got that accountability partner without you even being there.
Exactly. And one little mini point on that, I think people who get into exercising professions or physical therapy or training, it can be hard, at least it's hard for me, to realize that most people do not care about movement and do not care much about how their body works and do not like exercising. And most people will not over the long term just exercise for the sake of exercising. They feel like it's pointless and stupid. Even a lot of people who are driven to perform at a really high level athletically, it's essentially for that sort of primal feeling of getting one over somebody and being better than everybody else.
Yeah.
And like, that's why they practice and that's why they compete, so that they can show that they're the best. And if you took away the competitive element, they stop doing it. So like everybody, we don't always think about it, but like almost everybody needs a reason to exercise and move over and above just for the sake of it.
Yeah, okay. Because we don't have that. The competitiveness was if I go and do this thing to bring this buffalo down and bring it back, then our tribe wins because we survive, because we live through the winter. Where we don't have that anymore, so we have to go out and get that trophy, but we don't have to get the trophy, like, because Macca's has.
It costs. It costs. Like if you ask someone what they're doing on the weekend and they're like, oh, just going for a joyride in my car, like, you assume they have some spare cash because they're literally using fuel to move around without any specific goal in mind. Yeah. And then people are like, why is it so hard to get people to go to the gym, which is literally the same thing.
Yeah. Yeah.
I mean, I never found a car that goes faster the more you speed. The body definitely adapts. But like, from that cost perspective and energy perspective, there is no goal. The goal is just to do the movement itself. But you could literally just sit down and not do it, and everything would be the same. So for a lot of people, there's not a lot of drive in that.
So are there any things that, like, you hear all the time that people get wrong, that any common misconceptions about pain management that you'd like to dispel?
I honestly think, off the top of my head, I think the biggest misconception is that healthcare professionals, when they talk about pain science, it's being understood correctly. So what I mean by that is, I think a lot of people who have had a pain experience have also experienced somebody trying to give them an explanation of why it could be happening from a nerves perspective, how there's other factors other than just your movement, and like a sort of holistic approach about some of these concepts. But the way it's put across is understood as, like, that person goes home to their partner and goes like, oh, they told me it's all in my head, or like, they told me I have to be mindful or I have to think different. Oh yeah, cheers, man. Like, that's nothing I can do about that. That's useless. And so like, I almost think that, like, I feel like I'm this massive pro healthcare person here. Like almost like you're better off when you get an explanation from a healthcare professional about your experience, which I think is already pushing the envelope just by giving that. If they get it wrong, just assume that they're bad at explaining and assume that they are being misunderstood. They're trying to help. They may not be very good at it. And so if you feel like you're not being listened to, heard, and understood, you should probably go somewhere else if you've tried to correct the person and they haven't gotten it. But like, I just think a lot of people's experience is like accidentally invalidated because people are trying to educate people too much or give them an explanation too much, when really they do want some understanding and some real empathy.
Yeah, they're like, this hurts, I can't see a reason for it. I went to the doctor, the doctors said, okay, I understand what you're saying. This is the explanation for it. Nutted down, a 5-year-old brain goes, you said it's all in my head. Whereas the doctor should be like, I actually understand where you go. We do get this all the time and it is very real. Your pain is real. Now, there might be some reasons for it. Could be to do with this, or this. But unless you're that C-type personality, you're probably not going to be too interested in the whole explanation, but you feel validated because a doctor's told you, yes, your pain's real, sort of thing.
100%. I've had people who not even able to like have say for example an ankle issue, can literally barely walk, and are still saying to me like, I feel like a hypochondriac. Like I don't know if it's, I'm like, mate, they fused your ankle. Like it's physically different. So like, yeah, I bet it feels different. Fair enough. They knocked you out and then they did something to it, so it's different. It's all good that it feels different. As for like, if it's not able to be used, like let's look towards what we can do. But like, it's your experience, man. I have literally no clue. And like most health professionals, I think were very, very shocked if they ever have a good way of, we used to do like role plays, people would make a statement, you would like actually identify the emotion they're expressing, the thoughts they're having, and you would restate it to them. And then they would just give you a grade. Like, yep, C minus, didn't really get what I was saying, but like, I guess A plus, exactly what I was thinking and feeling. And most people are shocked beyond belief that they're getting hit with the D, they're getting hit with the C. Oh, I was so empathetic, I'm such an amazing communicator. Well, the person you're seeing is experiencing you as unempathetic and a terrible communicator.
Yeah, that's like working with people with disabilities. You're going to have different levels of understanding of what you're saying, and I'm one of those people that whenever anybody says something, I feel I was born with a guilty conscience. So when you said that, I feel like it's me. Whether you intended it or not, that really doesn't matter. It's like I'm just going to believe. I'm like, yeah, that's probably what I do. And then you try and work it. Yeah, and you try and feel like how do I get? But how? So you having that role play, that sounds like a good idea. So what was that specifically the way that you feel that you got better at it? Or is that?
Oh yeah. And because like I think there's such a big element of like ego in the profession as well, and like you want, like most people like being right to some degree, and if you get invested in what you're doing or what you think the treatment is, you're biased and it makes you not listen. Like if somebody is like, I try as hard as I can, this is probably a lifelong thing, I try as hard as I can to like give essentially this message to people. The only thing I am actually interested in is like having a correct understanding of what you value, what you want to need, and like how you're experiencing what we're doing. So like, just tell me if I'm clueless, or like tell me if I'm way off the mark, or tell me if you feel like this is complete rubbish and has no value or relevance. Because if you give off any impression except that, people are going to be like, oh yeah, I did the exercises, oh yeah, or they're going to be like, oh, that makes total sense, with like eyes glazed over, totally no clue what you're talking about. To essentially make you feel good, because they can see that it'll upset you or make you feel bad or something. And so like, I just try to have no attachment except to facilitate, like try and help this person try and support someone trying to reach their goal.
Because that's the people come in and they've got you're a professional, or explained it to you, you didn't understand it, I've explained it to them wrong, I'm not smart enough to explain it to them the right way, and I'll just agree, and then they go out not getting what you're wanting to deliver because they've or 20 other reasons. But when you've empowered them at the start to let them know you want to hear what they're saying, you are human, you might receive that information differently than intended, and that you want them to let you know if you have.
that's why so much, like you were asking about people in specific situations in terms of how they can communicate or receive information, like that to me just represents like that you would take more time to ensure you have a method of communication that works. I have people where I might be doing like an RPE, like what's out of 10, how hard was that exercise? And if you have somebody who's like, well, I can't really perceive my body's position in space very well. I don't know. It felt like there was weight. I'm not going to use it because what the hell, like it's pointless, or you come up with some way. Or if somebody, you just are there to engage in that process of getting on the same page until you are on the same page, and then you've started the process. And until then, you literally would be going in a different direction.
Okay. Yeah. I like it.
So yeah, I think that communication needs to be better from healthcare professionals. Empathy and understanding needs to be better from healthcare professionals, because I think that the biggest misconception is that a lot of the negative experiences people have with healthcare professionals, the miscommunication is the thing that what's the word? The thing that's going wrong the most times is people thinking that it's not a communication problem. They think they've got some unsolvable issue, or they think they've got some impossible to understand issue. It actually was just the other person being bad at explaining it and listening to you. Like, yeah, that's the biggest misconception, that it's not that most of the time, I reckon. Communication's the biggest thing missing.
Yeah. Yeah. Because whatever the profession is, whatever how many years of education I've done, at the end of the day, they're still just a human. They're still just another person with their own life and their own stuff, and they're even the amazing people are just people.
And like, what's a view that you're gonna have, or what's the experience you're gonna have if the first thing that happens when you walk into a setting like that and the person gives you some advice that isn't applicable to your life? Okay, great. So literally wasn't listening to me, literally doesn't understand me on a personal level. Great, cool. Well, let's go on. Like from here, like what a terrible start.
Yeah. Well, it's like in order, they're like they've heard 3/4 of it. Their brain needs some coffee, and they're like, this is what it is. This is yeah.
Exactly right.
Now, and what's one piece of advice you would give someone who feels stuck in a cycle of pain?
I wouldn't have any advice for people on what to do. I would just have some advice generally on how to get the most out of if you did choose to engage with specialists and professionals. Because I have no idea what would work for any individual. However, my general rule of thumb that I give as more like a guideline that might help them make their own decisions is, if you go to any given specialist and you ask or you put across to them that you want what I'm about to say and the person can't give it to you, may be good to look around and shop around. If somebody can't tell you what they think the problem is, or they give it to you and it doesn't really make sense or resonate, if they can't give you a clear plan or sort of timeline and what those milestones would be for that timeline towards the outcome that you actually want and you define, if you're not getting that, Like, are they really going to actually assist you that much? Do they even understand your problem?
Yeah. Yeah.
And so always just making sure that you feel confident that they understand the process and can help guide you through. And if you feel like there's, sorry, you go.
Oh no, you were talking.
Oh yeah.
I do that.
If a specialist, like, these people are supposedly university educated professionals, so they should be able to explain stuff fairly reasonable, or they have the qualification, or they have the experience, or whatever is required to create the relationship dynamic you're interested in. They should be able to explain it. And so if they're saying like, it's this, the cause is that, we're going to do this, we're going to do this, and you don't get what they're saying, you should just be able to, and it should be an environment where you feel comfortable just going, what does that mean? And they can just tell you in a way that you then understand and are on the same page. And if they can't, well, what are they playing at? Like,
it's like their time's important because you're paying for it, but your time's important as well. And if you don't get what you're paid for, that is going to cost you more time afterwards if you haven't got what you went into the professional for in the first place, or at least a plan towards getting what you went there for in the first place. Then,
well, yeah, I just think that, yeah, like if you're engaging with a professional, well, they're delivering a service to you. And so one would hope that they can render that service, and that you come in, and like every other service profession works like this. You come in, you say, I vaguely have a problem. I want something to be different. I want something to come here or go away. Make it so. And people go, oh, yep. They have kind of a checklist and framework they run through to identify exactly what needs to happen. And then they tell you, and then you say yay or nay. And there's a shared decision-making element based on shared understanding of the same information and the same view to inform two people moving towards the same goal.
Pearls of wisdom. So I always ask everybody at the end, this doesn't have to be to what we're talking, any pearls of wisdom, just anything that your life has taught you that you think other people need to know about anything at all.
I'll get really, really one-handed clapping philosophical here. Pearls of wisdom, because honestly, it probably was one of the most genuinely helpful things for me, and with my own body as well and my mind. But like, sometimes, when you're trying to be mindful or aware or something like that, you realize that you're holding on to something. Just because you notice that you're holding on to it, you may not let it go. And you can never force yourself to let go of anything. You can never force yourself to release any tension. All you can do is notice, and maybe just be happy that you noticed and had more awareness. And then you got to leave it. Or you end up like me, where you go, relax now. You're so tight, you're so tense. And then you go, man, I feel wound up. This is miserable.
Yeah. So it's it's like Frozen. Let it go, let it go.
Yeah, and you might find that it hangs on after you think let it go, and then you just got to leave. Come back to it later. Maybe you'll let go of it at another time when you feel like it.
Yeah. Cool. Hey, I like that. I like the pearl of wisdom thing, because you just get because we've all got stuff.
It's a good one. I like it.
All right. Well, I've really enjoyed this today. Thank you, Aaron, very much for joining us today. So that'll bring us to the end of our episode of Vicarious Insights. Learn with me. I still don't know this off by heart, so I'm reading it. And If you've enjoyed today's episode, please be sure to subscribe to our podcast so you never miss an episode. You'll find us on all of the platforms, Spotify, Apple Podcast, all of that, YouTube. Please leave us a rating and review, chat, ask a question. Feedback is beneficial for us all. There will be contact details for Aaron, links and stuff in the podcasts and the YouTube. And on the Facebook site. So if you need to reach out to him, if you've got pain of any sort, if you need some assistance with that. Now, you mentioned that you did telehealth for someone in Victoria. So I'm assuming that telehealth is available with you?
Correct.
Yeah, so you can get it. And other than that, you guys are pretty widespread too. You guys go, what is it? You Brisbane, Redlands, Logan, Ipswich, Gold Coast, Scenic Ring. So is that right?
I think you pretty much summed that up, yeah.
Yeah. So you've got the mobile if you need to see face to face. It's available, and the other details there. So thank you very much, Aaron. Have a good one, and I will turn off. Now, actually, I'll just do for the soundbite.